to on HTML pages. They enable you to, or the user, to input information. So you can then get some information from the user and redirect to or modify a page depending on what they put in. So forms, there's two key elements. You have inputs. So input tags enable the user to put in some kind of information, so be it text. You've also got other elements like radio boxes, check boxes, drop-down lists, but text are a very easy one to see and to visualize. And input tags, then you also have input tags, so inputs where you have some other kind of input. You can also have label tags. So labels are where, as part of a form, you might have some text or something that is linked to an input or an input tag of some sort. So yeah, you've got here an example of a form. So a form here inside of which we have an ordered list with 3 items. And for each item, we've created an input. So an input tag which we're using to create an element where the user can enter some kind of content, and a label which corresponds to that input. So you can see that we've got then an ID for our input, and label has a for attribute which then links it to a specific input element. I don't want to spend too much time going through these. Much like when we get to JavaScript, a lot of coding, it's best learnt by doing, not by me sort of standing here and doing the equivalent of reading a dictionary at you. So I mean, this is good as a reference, and I can go through and try and highlight key points, but it's not really, I think, useful for me to stand here and just run through every type of tag. It's, I think, better for you to have a play with that in the tutorials, and we design tutorial exercises to be able to give you a chance to do that. So I won't go through, just with the following, so just with the examples of form tags, and that I won't go into too much detail. You'll get some chances to play with this in the tutorials. One thing I would also like to highlight, though I forgot to mention, is there's the action attribute for a form. So if you have, when you create the form, you set the action attribute. That is the location of the file that the browser will redirect to that when you submit the form. So yeah, if you that's something to be aware of. So the action attribute associated with the form defines where the browser will redirect to, so where the information that you input will be redirected to. Yeah, so I won't go through drop-down boxes. Oh, actually, no, I do want to mention this. So let's say, so with HTML, remember that angle brackets are special characters. They define tags. So if we want to, let's say I'm writing some text and then I want to group some of it, and I might put a span tag in the middle of my paragraph. I will start with an open angle bracket, write span, close angle bracket. But let's say I wanted to actually have a open angle bracket as part of the text. So what we can do there is we can use what's known as an escape sequence. So we start with an ampersand and then GT, so for greater than. That gives us a close angle bracket, or ampersand LT will give us a less than symbol. So in this way, we can use the ampersand, which is an escape character, we'll call it, to be able to give us those special characters where the browser would otherwise normally start to interpret it as a special sequence of characters. We can use the ampersand to instead specify that, hang on, this next character should be interpreted as that character, not as the start of some kind of not as the start of a tag or something. Let's say we want an ampersand. So let's say we don't want the ampersand to be treated as an ampersand. We want to actually write an ampersand. In that case, we have ampersand AMP. So, but yes, that's something to be aware of. And actually, that did come up in the workshop last week. I think I was walking through a solution with someone, and yeah, we ran into that problem where, for some reason, the browser was interpreting. It had, I think, copied and pasted and was interpreting tags as the raw text that it had escaped the angle brackets. So URLs, I mentioned these earlier, but essentially there's 2 key parts to a URL. We have the protocol. So I've highlighted here a URL. We have the protocol name first, then // then the host name. And then after the host name, we have the path on that host to whatever resource we're trying to obtain from that server. So the protocol goes at the start. You can often omit this in the browser. We'll just make an assumption to try HTTP or HTTPS. But yeah, HTTP is a very common one, HTTPS, FTP. Strictly speaking, I think you can have things here that aren't protocols, but essentially the protocol goes at the start. // and then you have the host name. So this is the domain name of the server that you're trying to access. So everything between the // and the first / is going to be the host name of the server you're trying to connect to. So protocol, host, and then the path. So in this case, we've just got a // so we're basically saying go to the root of that, go to the root of the file structure on that server. If, however, we wanted to access a different file, we could specify a path to that file, and so long as the permissions have been set up correctly to enable all users to access that file, you'll retrieve that. Query parameters, so when you pass information to the server, at the end of a URL, you can have a question mark, and then after that, you can have a set of ampersand separated name value, property value pairs. So let's say I want to call the example.com food file. I want to open that, but I want to pass it to parameters. And this will become more relevant again when we get to JavaScript and we show you how to actually parse these parameters and do things with them. But in this case, we're opening this file here. It's up to food. Then we have the question mark, which separates the parameters, so they come after that. So then we're saying we have name, Potter, so the name attribute is going to be Potter, and the age attribute is going to be 10. And yes, so after the question mark, you have essentially a grouping of attribute name equals value, ampersand, and then repeat. You can also have what are known as fragments. So this is where you have a hash tag, and then after that you have a hash symbol, and then after that you have a name of some ID. So I showed an example in the morning lecture where I was able to, I had a look at the source for a Wikipedia page, got the ID for a section, and linked to it by doing this. I put the URL for that section, for that page, and then used a fragment to be able to link to that page. So you can use these also with links to be able to have a hyperlink, to a specific subsection on a page rather than just defaulting to the top. It's worth pointing out these aren't sent to the server. They're just kept and used locally in the browser. It's essentially a directive to the browser to redirect or scroll to this relevant section. Web console, I brought that up before. Really, really useful. You'll use different elements of it throughout this course, particularly the elements section, which is the bit that allows you to see the different tags and the HTML source for the page and highlight various elements. You'll make substantial use of the JavaScript console. JavaScript console is used to, you can use that for debugging. When we get to the JavaScript sections of the course, you'll also be able to test out some JavaScript in that. Much like you can, actually, I don't know if I showed you this before. So we'll go back to our example here, and we'll have a look at the source in elements. We can actually edit the HTML. So this won't change the file, but we can edit the HTML as it's been loaded by the browser, which can be really useful just when you're trying to debug stuff or play around with it. For example, we'll go to the body. I'll right-click that and select Edit as HTML. So this opens the body tag and everything underneath it, and then that enables me to make changes, should I want. So let's put a H1 new heading, close the H1 tag, and now I'll click outside that, and you can see that we've actually altered the HTML as it's been loaded by the browser. This, of course, isn't changing the file. We're just modifying the browser's version of the file that it's loaded. So if I refresh the page, that all disappears. But we can use that to play around with code. We can also do things like let's say we'll open up the console, go to Elements. Let's find a section. We'll open this div. I'm trying to find just a small subsection of the page. Okay, let's remove that header. Yeah, so you can see you can also remove sections, you can edit the page in line. Obviously it doesn't change what's stored on the server or what's stored in the actual file, but very, very useful as a tool for you to play with. The JavaScript console, sorry, I sort of got sidetracked there for a second, enables you to do similar things. So don't worry so much about what I'm typing here. So if you don't know what I mean by alert hello world, don't worry too much. We will cover that next week. It's a little bit of JavaScript. But you can also execute JavaScript. So you can see I've created a little pop-up window here with hello world. So you can execute JavaScript directly in the web console. So again, very useful for debugging purposes. For more substantial things, you'd obviously want to store them in an external file and link. But yeah, that's something very, very useful you can use for debugging purposes. And much like I showed you earlier where you can also use it for debugging purposes. So we've got an error here where the images can't be found. You can have a look at the console and it will often display those errors for you, which can be really, really useful if your code's not doing what you expect it to. Just have a look at the errors. Sometimes they might give you a little bit of an insight into what's gone wrong. Okay, so we then have just a link to the World Wide Web Consortium. They develop the standards for HTML and a number of other web technologies. They also have the validator, which you would have had a play with in the last week's tutorial. Website archive, so this is also a resource you can use to, it periodically archives content on the web, so you can use that to find stuff that might have been removed. Okay, so that's it for the HTML lectures. So we can shut that down.